Hello, friends. My name is Cindy, and I am one of the children's librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. And today we are here to do the fourth reading of Ivy by Katherine Coville. We are going to start with Chapter 9, No Place to Rest. Not so far away, on a moonlit road, 4 dark figures prowled through the shadows. They scratched their backsides, picked their noses, and snorted with glee. Along their way, they had frightened a herd of deer, played the drums on a box turtle shell, and chased a bear. Now they were filling a badger's hole with dirt and stones. They were trolls, nasty as could be. Nobody liked them, and they didn't care. They just smiled their horrible smiles and showed their green teeth and looked for more mean tricks to play. And so they traveled uphill and down, right to the outskirts of the village of Broomsweep. There they sneaked around in the darkest shadows, watching and waiting to see where they could cause the most trouble. It was another peaceful night in Broomsweep. The crickets had gone to sleep, and quiet filled the air. The moon shone silver on Grandmother's dusty cottage. Inside, Grandmother snored just a little bit, and Ivy was dreaming her favorite dream. She was flying over the village, higher than the treetops. She was gliding over the village square. This time she saw people down below. They looked very small. She was trying to get closer and see their faces, when suddenly there was a big noise. Achoo! Ivy's eyes popped open just in time to see a flash of light behind the cottage. She knew this was not a part of her dream. There was a loud knock on the back door, and then Ivy heard it again. Achoo! There was another flash of light from outside as Grandmother lit the lantern and hurried to open the door. Through the open doorway, Ivy could see a small fire on the ground. She could also see a pair of large lizard-like feet stamping the fire out. "Good evening, Dragon," said Grandmother. At this, Ivy had to stick her head out the door and look. There really was a dragon in their own backyard. He seemed a bit small for a dragon, but he was a real dragon all the same. His scales shone bright green in the lantern's light. "Do forgive me," he was saying, "but I would like very much to speak to the healer." "I am Meg the healer," said Grandmother. "That's a terrible sneeze you have there, my dear. Are you feverish?" "I think so," answered the dragon. "I think I have a cold." Over in the griffin's nest, Poof was yapping excitedly. Cedric stuck his head up and said, "Who goes there?" "Ah!" "Oh, excuse me for disturbing you. Balthazar is by name." "How do you do? I didn't mean to wake you. It's just that I have this code." With that, he gave another sneeze, shooting flames out of both nostrils and setting fire to a nearby rosebush. Here he is setting fire to the rosebush. Ivy quickly grabbed the water bucket and put out the fire. "The first thing we must do is find you a safe place to rest," said Grandmother. "Ivy, please." The stream. He can stay under the big weeping willow near the water's edge and aim his sneezes at the stream. I must prepare a potion. Ivy felt a little nervous. She never imagined that she would be so close to a real dragon, even a small one. She wondered if he would sneeze on her by accident. "Don't worry," said the dragon, as if he were reading her thoughts. "If I have to sneeze, I will sneeze in the other direction." "That's very kind of you, I'm sure," replied Ivy politely. She remembered Grandmother telling her about dragons and to be very polite to them. "My name is Ivy," she said. "Won't you please come this way?" Ivy led Balthazar down the path to the stream and over to the weeping willow tree. Its soft branches hung down to the ground like a curtain. Ivy pulled the branches aside and showed the dragon how they made a little room around the trunk. "Ah, thank you," said the dragon. "This will be fine. I've had no place to rest since they made me leave my cave. That's why I caught a cold." "Someone made you leave your cave?" asked Ivy. "Why?" "They didn't want any magical creatures. Too much trouble, they said. Too disorderly," answered Balthazar. "All I did was blast my flabbing breath down the mountainside, but they wouldn't listen. They kept going on about the Dew Queen. The the Dew Queen this, the Dew Queen that, and a contest of some sort. I thought they were all very disrespectful. I left right then and there. I let them worry about the trolls, I said. It won't be my fault if anything happens. The trolls? Asked Ivy. Yes, you know, big hairy creatures with ruddy noses, always misbehaving, very rude. They live in the cave below mine, but they are afraid of my flame, so I always kept them from causing any trouble. But down they are probably running wild. How terrible! Exclaimed Ivy. Yes, the dragon agreed. Then he poked his head out of the curtain of hanging branches and sneezed. Achoo! Shooting flames right into the stream. There was a loud sizzling sound, and a cloud of steam rose into the night air. Bless you, said Ivy. Thank you, said the dragon. So you've been banished from your home, too? Yes, I'd be quite without a home. It's a hard thing to bear when you are as old as I am. How old are you? Asked Ivy. Looking more closely at him in the lamplight, she could see that some of the green scales had turned silver at the edges. Then she thought it might not be polite to ask about a dragon's age. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have asked. Oh, it's quite all right. I will be 300 years old this winter. You must be very wise after having lived so long. Oh, yes, you could ask me anything. I'd be very helpful. Ivy smiled. We do have a problem, she began. Maybe you could help us. Chapter 10. Peter. Yes, replied the dragon. Go ahead, you could tell me. Well, to start, everyone in town is angry with us. They don't understand us at all. It sounds as if you need some friends. Friends? Asked Ivy. Yes, you know, people who like you, who will stick up for you. Oh, you mean friends. Yes, friends, that's what I said, replied the dragon. You need to make friends with these people. Friends will accept you the way you are. Share something with them. Just start with one person, one at a time. That's my advice. Ivy thought about this for a minute. She tried to imagine making friends with any of the children who called her names, but she couldn't. She thanked the dragon anyway. Ivy stayed to keep Balthazar company until Grandmother arrived with her potion a little while later. By then, Ivy was yawning. She was very, very tired. Grandmother yawned too as she gave the dragon a bucket of the super-strength sneezelwort potion she had prepared. They wished the dragon a good night and followed the path back up to the cottage. As they walked, Ivy told Grandmother the dragon's story. It's a good thing he came here, said Grandmother. He can stay with us now. Does that mean we're going to be in even more trouble? Asked Ivy. I expect so, said Grandmother, but let's give it a little time. I'm sure we can work something out. Ivy wondered how Grandmother could be so sure, but she decided not to ask. After all the night's excitement, Ivy and Grandmother nearly overslept. Ivy rushed through breakfast. She hurried to take care of all the creatures. She gave each of them fresh food and water and bedding. She checked on the fox whose tail had been caught in a trap. She washed his cuts and changed his bandage again. She gave him and his mate each a little treat and scratched behind their ears. She petted a beaver who had a bee sting on his nose and put a little of Grandmother's anti-sting potion on him. The chipmunk's sneeze had improved and he wanted to play, but Ivy knew she had to hurry. Mayor Peevish and the whole town council would be coming today, and Ivy worried that the mess would never be cleaned up in time. But Grandmother said they could only do their best, so Ivy grabbed a broom and started to sweep, while Grandmother made up more potion for the dragon. Soon there was a buzzing around Ivy's head. She laughed and said hello to the Pixies. Some of them sat on her head and shoulders as she worked. She was glad the Pixies liked her, even though they tickled. Ivy had barely finished sweeping the front steps when she noticed Peter spying on her from the bushes. She frowned. Why should she be nice to him when he called her names and stuck out his tongue all the time? Ivy got mad even thinking about it. She had had enough of Peter's nastiness. Just to see what would happen, she pointed to his hiding place in the bushes and said, "Get him, Pixies, get him!" No sooner were the words out of her mouth than a swarm of pixies followed Ivy's outstretched arms straight toward Peter. They began buzzing around his head, pulling his hair, and pinching him. Peter jumped from the bushes, slapping his neck and then his arms. "Ow!" he yelped, swatting at the air. "Ouch!" The buzzing rose to a fever pitch, and the pinchings got worse and worse. Peter looked as if he might cry. Suddenly, Ivy felt sorry for him. What had she done? She remembered what Balthazar had said the night before about sharing something to make a friend. The pixie attack wasn't going to make Peter her friend. Here he is getting attacked by the pixies. "Stop, Pixies, please stop," Ivy commanded, but the pixies continued to buzz angrily around Peter. He was going to have to make friends with them the same way she had. "Peter," she said, "I can help you. I have something special to show you. Do you want to see?" "Anything. Just get rid of these bugs," he bawled. First, Ivy took both of his hands tightly in hers so that he would stop swatting. Peter was so surprised that he stopped fussing and looked into her face as if he had never seen her before. "Listen, Peter," Ivy said. "They're not bugs. They're wonderful little people with wings. They're pixies. If you can make friends with them, they'll stop pinching you." "I don't believe you," said Peter, sniffling. "They understand everything you say. Say something nice to them. Say, 'I like pixies.'" "What?" "Say, 'I like pixies,' or 'magical creatures are nice.' Just say something friendly." "This is stupid," said Peter. "Trust me," insisted Ivy. "Oh, all right," grumbled Peter. "Pixies are nice." "Good. Now hold out your hand like this," said Ivy. "Hold it very still and just keep talking." "I like pixies. Pixies are nice," Peter droned. Something whizzed past his head and he started to look around. "I wish I could see one," he said. As soon as Peter said the words, a tiny pixie landed on his open hand and took a bow. Peter's face lit up. "This is a pixie?" Peter asked in astonishment. "This is the tiniest person I've ever seen. It's not a bug at all." Smiling broadly, he brought his hand a little closer to his face to see the pixie more clearly. "I do like pixies," he said quietly. "They are wonderful, aren't they?" "Just don't try to grab them," Ivy warned, "or they won't be friendly anymore." "Will they come home with me?" "I don't know. You'll have to ask them. Be polite." Peter spoke to the pixies more nicely than Ivy had ever heard him speak to anyone before. She hoped he would stay nice now and stop teasing her the way he usually did. "If you want," Ivy said cautiously, "I'll introduce you to the griffin, and I'll tell you a secret. We have a dragon now, too. He has a cold and he sneezes fire." "I want to see," said Peter, his eyes going wide. "I can't take you right now," Ivy said, "but maybe later. Grandmother and I have to clean up the whole garden and the cottage before the mayor comes." She took the edge of her apron and began wiping dust off an azalea plant, one leaf at a time. Peter tried to say something, but it looked as if his mouth might break. Finally, the word came out. "Please, please, may I see your dragon?" Ivy was so surprised she dropped her apron. She had never heard Peter say please before. "I guess I can take a little break," she chuckled. "Come on then. Just remember, you must always be very polite to dragons." Ivy led Peter around the house and down the path to the weeping willow tree. Chapter 11. Deep Trouble. In the village square, a crowd was forming. People were carrying shovels and rakes and brooms. At the center of the crowd were the 10 members of the town council. At the center of the town council stood the mayor, the Honorable Dudley Peevish, and directly behind the mayor stood his wife. "Now, tell them that this just won't do," hissed Mistress Peevish to the mayor, poking him in the ribs. This just won't do," said Mayor Peevish to the town council. The members of the town council said to the crowd, "This won't do." "Tell them that their terrible mess must be cleaned up," insisted the mayor's wife. The terrible mess must be cleaned up," said the mayor. "Tell them the magical creature has got to go," demanded the mayor's wife. "Say that he's upsetting everyone. Tell them the beast stole my poofy pie. Tell them." The mayor repeated everything she told him. "Now, let's go," commanded his wife. "Now, let's go," echoed the mayor. Mistress Peevish poked him in the ribs again, and he began to march down the road with her right behind him. The town council marched after them. They all came to a stop in front of Grandmother's cottage. The mayor's wife stuck her elbow in the mayor's side. "Hello?" called the mayor. There was a short silence. "Oh, there's no one home," said the mayor. "I guess we'd better leave." "Oh, no, you don't," declared the grand and haughty Mistress Peevish, and she marched right up to the front door and banged on it. Down at the stream, Ivy and Peter were having a lovely visit with Balthazar and Cedric, and Poof had joined them. The dragon and the griffin were taking turns telling the children's stories. Ivy liked the story about the search for the hornless unicorn. Peter's favorite was the story of the dragon and the 3 blind knights. At first, Peter had been a little afraid to get close to the magical beasts. They were the most magnificent creatures he had ever seen. But they were very friendly and pleasant to him. They called him Master Peter, which made him feel quite grown up. When Ivy finally said she had to go back to work, Peter was very sorry to leave. "Can I come and visit again?" he asked as they walked back up the pathway to the cottage. "You can if you're always as nice as you are now," said Ivy. Peter looked a little embarrassed. "I'll try to be," he promised. Ivy smiled happily and said, "All right then." It was only when they rounded the corner of the cottage that they saw the people gathered in front of it. Ivy saw the mayor's wife standing on the doorstep, banging on the door. Behind her stood the mayor and the whole town council and the crowd of villagers, shaking their shovels and rakes and brooms. She thought she and grandmother must be in deep trouble, and her throat tightened. What should she do? Just then, grandmother opened the door. She was wearing her work apron and holding a jar of potion in her hand. "Oh, you've come," said grandmother brightly. "I was just fixing up some medicine for the dragon. He has such a terrible cold." Ivy made her way to the door and quietly slipped in to stand by grandmother's side. "Dragon? What dragon?" demanded Mistress Peevish, who was almost turning green. "Oh, you haven't met him yet. He just arrived last night," said grandmother, smiling sweetly. "I'm sure you'll like him when you get to know him. He's very well-mannered." "Why, you can't do this," spluttered the mayor's wife, shaking her fist. She grabbed the mayor by the collar and pulled him up to the doorstep. Tell her that she can't have a dragon. Not with the new queen coming tomorrow to judge our town. Tell her all the magical creatures have to go." Here's a picture of all the people at the door. I guess the magical creatures had better go, mumbled Mayor Peevish. "Nonsense," said grandmother. "They'll be just fine here. I couldn't think of sending them away when they came to me for help. Perhaps you'd like to meet them. They're really very charming." "No, he wouldn't like to meet them," snarled Mistress Peevish. "And if you won't tell them to leave, the mayor will. Won't you?" she said to the mayor, poking him in the ribs again. The mayor looked up at his wife's angry face. He looked at grandmother, smiling sweetly. He appeared as though he would like to go hide somewhere, but he couldn't. "Well, he said, I guess we'd better not see any magical creatures around here. That's all I can say. Isn't that right, dear?" he asked his wife. "We'd better not," she threatened, "or we'll run them out of town ourselves." "Yes," said all the town councilors, "we'll run them out of town." "Run them out of town!" yelled the crowd. "Run them out of town!" And they shook their rakes and brooms. And next time we read, we will start with chapter 12 called Wah-Ha-Ha-Ha. I hope that you have enjoyed today's reading of Ivy by Katherine Coville, and I will look forward to reading you the final part tomorrow. Thanks for coming by, friends. My name is Cindy. I am one of the children's librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I thank you for stopping by. Bye-bye, friends.